I'm a passionate thinker that works in the marketing and communications industry. I am myself, a woman trying to fashion a future for herself in a very uncertain world. I am also a mother responsible for curating the life of my 6-year-old daughter in such a way that she's able to imagine a future for herself. I therefore draw from this self that needs to remain whole in order to pour into another life that has runway ahead of it. I was raised in a society whose intention by the Apartheid government of South Africa was actually isolation, division, and suppression. I was raised in the homelands of South Africa, referred to commonly as Bantustan. The portion, 30% of land in South Africa, created along ethnic and tribal lines for Black people that so desired to go and thrive there and nowhere else. It was a pseudo-free society, pseudo-sovereign type of society living off the economic lifeline of apartheid South Africa. An interesting dynamic, though, within that society is in its smallness, in its containedness. There was almost an incubator of multiculturalism and dynamism as one was surrounded by access to broadcasting, to authors and artists that were within walking distance, which were part of our community, that helped fashion the possibility that one could also, if only given the chance, could make it too. Now, I liken the experience of growing up in a Bantustan through the intention of apartheid as what it's like to survive lockdown regulations and COVID-19. Please understand, the intentions of the lockdown regulations are very, very different from those of the nefarious intentions of the apartheid state through Bantustan. However, I'm finding that my soul's desire to seek more, to do more, and to break the physical confinement is exactly similar to what I employed during my upbringing. I'm not taking this posture as some kind of pseudo-activist. I'm not taking a political stance. But the objective of my talk is actually to draw attention to the irrepressible nature of humanity and the desire for more, despite the circumstances that they are born in, or they are raised in, or they are limited to. I think about this because it is a valuable analogy for the psychological impact I found, at least in myself, of lockdown. What I found is myself tapping into the same drive and the same desire for connectedness that I had even when I was limited to a small town, as what I did after the announcement of lockdown. However, I also found a deep desire to open the boundaries and my barriers and actually understand what other people, other than myself, in different settings and different situations were undergoing. I may also be speaking from a position of relative privilege because internet connection and data were the least of my issues. I found, due to COVID-19 and the regulations that locked me to a physical destination, a physical place and a location that I had to observe. It was mandatory because survival depended on it. I worked even harder than what I probably would have had I had the physical means to find other people, to find connection, and to get to know what other people are going through. I found that I traveled more during COVID-19 and the lockdown situation than I would have had I had the physical means. Because in reality, I may not actually have had the financial means to travel as vastly as I desired. So I went to Italy. I went to the Duomo and I listened to Andrea Bocelli. I invited friends across the global community into my world, and we enjoyed the jazz sounds of South Africa through the virtual concerts that we had. I was more deliberate in exploring art and the various art exhibitions in the world. I was more connected and deliberate in listening and observing and reading to and engaging with my 6-year-old child, as it was just the two of us in the house. And she was also confined to online schooling. What is this? What is this a demonstration of, you may ask? I think there is something in the circumstances that we are in, where fear is brought to the fore, and we are inundated with negative news, negative press about where the world is going, and the sense of gloom that, at least in my spirit, kindled a rebellion. It kindled a rebellion in spirit against the pessimism that I was facing, and it galvanized in me a courage and a greater will to live. I was more driven to live during the pandemic time than I may have taken for granted when everything was accessible and available to me. In any sort of lockdown situation, driven by fear, courage is called to the fore. And when we think about courage, we think about big deeds. We think about these major actions. We think about bravado. No, I'm not referring to that. I mean the small and subtle actions of willing yourself to wake up just today and do what you need to do just today to allow yourself to get to the next. In COVID-19 times, what I found is courage for me involved the vulnerability to shed a tear in front of my loved ones as I commiserated via virtual funerals with people I cared for. And after that, allowing myself to get back to my original happy setting. I found that courage was the ability to acknowledge the fear that I felt in the moment as someone that depends on income that involves connecting with people where I'm forced to disconnect. I found the courage was acknowledging the fear, letting it pass, and getting to the next side. I found that courage was facing my child who was feeling stressed and confined and limited, and finding the time in my schedule to just take a walk in the garden with her. And even say to her, my baby, I don't know right now, but I trust that it will be okay. When is it going to end? I've often had to say, I'm not certain just yet. But what I know is that we will be okay. I found myself having to face the reality of undergoing a test because it felt to me like I was experiencing the symptoms, and surrendering myself to the process with a latent fear around what would happen to my child hereafter. Now, if I go back to the origins of my upbringing and being locked in a small community, a physical location whose mindset was supposed to be the full parameters of my destiny, I'm finding that the same energy that I used to spring myself into action and imagine a life beyond what was sitting in front of me is what I am using right now to get me through. How is this important for dynamically shaping the future? I would argue that as we are, as practitioners of daily courage, we are the means and we are the tools that are going to dynamically shape the future. That the job of imagining a post-pandemic world resides first and foremost with us, writing the rule book as we see them for ourselves moving forward. The next step after that is taking those same rule books that we have written for ourselves and actually having the temerity to reach out into the world and find like minds and connect with them. Because I have learned through COVID-19 that as isolated as I have felt in my lockdown, there's a whole world of others just like me. And just because I'm not able to physically walk to them due to the limitation in movement does not mean I am not able to access them. And in fact, with the means that I do have, even if it is virtual, it is in me to infuse a sense of humanity in the way that I use the technology before me. I am able to virtually connect, and that is not any less of a connection. It is the means that I have in the time that I have. I'm finding that I'm inspired to take that and infuse it into my home to enable my own child to fathom a future for herself, where her physical limitations, her physical location do not determine the extent to which she's able to reach out into the world. In dynamically shaping the future, I think COVID-19 is compelling us to rise to the occasion of connecting and reconstructing our sense of the world in the comfort of our own home and acknowledging the discomfort of our feelings about what we have known before, but the opportunity is right in front of us to do it differently and to do more.